morning, everybody. My name is Terry. I'm one of the pastors here. And if it's your first time, welcome. We're really excited that you decided to be a part of our church today. And thank you to those that maybe invited a friend or a neighbor to come and join us as we wrap up this series entitled Daniel. And if you're new to our church, watching online in the balcony or on the floor, what we typically try to do is we try to navigate through God's truths, and that we believe that God's word is true. And what we do is that every month we try to establish 3, 4, or 5 weeks of study around a certain story or certain principles that God can teach us through His Word. And so we've been going through the story of a man by the name of Daniel, and we've been gleaning some principles through his life, and every week we've been trying to apply those to our own lives in very practical and real-world situations. And so if you're kind of joining us, you're at the tail end, but no concern, we're going to catch you up to speed, because in week 1, we learned this point, and these are the 3 points we learned over the last 3 weeks. First, we learned that everyone needs a line of conviction in their life. That if you're not a follower of Jesus, listen to this story. Many of us as Christians, we say that we follow Jesus, but yet it's hard for you to pinpoint the difference between a Christian and not a Christian. Does that make sense? Like, you look at someone's life and you're like, well, I don't see much of a difference between you and me. And that's because many Christians don't have a line of conviction. And Daniel taught us this because Daniel was a royal individual who was taken from his homeland. And what they did is they changed his name, they changed his education. But then when it got to a point where they told him, you need to dishonor your God and follow what I want, that's where Daniel drew his line and says, I'm sorry, you can change my name, you can change my education, but you are not going to make me disobey my God. And so we learned that every one of us has to identify in our lives what is our line of conviction. What are we willing to do or not willing to do according to God's word? The second week we learned this, that our past promises should propel our prospective pursuits. That's a lot of P's. And the reason why this may be confusing to some is we learned this, and I'm going to break it down. It says that our past promises on the mountaintop experiences. You see, it's really easy to be a Christian when everything's going great. But being a Christian means that we practice our faith. And sometimes the only way to really practice our faith is when we have to truly trust God in situations where we can't see what's going to happen. And so what we said is that on the mountaintop, if we say that, God, you are amazing, you are incredible, I see you, I sense you, you give me a sense of peace and a sense of purpose, Lord, I pray that I never forget these truths. Then, if we make that establishment on the mountain, when the next valley comes, and by the way, valleys always come. When I'm standing in that valley, if I'm faithful to my promises back here, they will propel my perspective pursuits. And so rather than reacting in the valley, we lean on the promises that we made on the mountaintop. And the last 3 weeks into the message, because last week we took a week off, we learned that conflict clutters clarity. If you remember, we learned the art of confrontation. We learned the principle that God designed confrontation to always be a positive. Some of you are like, no, He didn't. Yes, He did. Because the truth is confrontation should always be about truth. Some of us, we get in confrontations with people not for truth's sake. That's why it's negative. But God designed confrontation for us to always seek after the truth in every situation. And if we do that, then it becomes very clear. But conflict of personality, conflict of focus always clutters clarity in confrontation. Some of you are like, boy, this guy uses a lot of P's and a lot of C's. Yes, it was that kind of series. And so today, I'm excited because we're going to jump into a 4th principle that we're going to learn together. And so if you're someone that is like, all right, Terry, I really, don't like long messages. If you could just get to the point. Well, guess what? I'm going to give you the point before we even get in the message, okay? And you can take a nap if you'd like. And so here's the main point we're going to learn today. Consistency brings clarity to purpose. Consistency brings clarity to purpose. And we're going to learn about that in just a second. Let me illustrate this another way. Many of you know that I used to coach high school and college baseball back way long time ago. And I'll never forget a confrontation that I had with one of my players. You see, I had a player, he was a good hitter, and he would get in the box, and in baseball, you're going to have to face a pitcher, and a pitcher's throwing a baseball at you, and your job is to hit the ball, and so he's in there, and so all of a sudden the pitcher got ready, and he threw the first pitch, and the batter was up there, and he took his first swing, and he swung, and he missed. So he stepped out of the box, and he was frustrated because that's strike one. So he gets back in the box, he's like, all right, I'm ready for you now, and the pitcher wound up and made the pitch, and he swung hard, strike two. He backed out of the box and gathered himself and said, all right, I only got one strike left. He got back in the box, and he went ahead, and he doubled down, and he sat there, and he was like, all right, I'm going to give everything I got. And the pitcher threw the pitch, and he swung as hard as he could. And he swung, and he missed, strike three, and he was out. At the end of the game, I went up to him, and I said this. I said, do you know what your problem is? And he looked at me, and he said, what? And I said, you're inconsistent. And he said, can you explain it to me? I said, yeah. I said, when you got in the box, you went ahead and, all three times you swung the same way. And he looked at me and he said, but coach, isn't that consistent? And I said, no. I said, let me ask you a question. What is your job when you're hitting? And he said, to hit the ball hard. I go, okay. I said, but break it down. What is the ultimate job? And he said, to hit the ball right. And I said, and what happened is you forgot your purpose. Because what you might not know is this, is that most hitters know this, that my job is not to strike out, my job is to put the ball in play. I have to hit the ball. And so with two strikes, what we teach hitters is that to spread their lower half, in other words, take it out. And all you do is you stand up there, is you slow everything down. And your job is, if you understand your purpose is I don't need to hit it hard. I don't need to swing as hard as I want. I have to hit the ball because that's going to help my team. And so when the pitch comes, all you do is you just make contact and you go to first base. That was his purpose. He was inconsistent in his purpose. He might have been consistent in his approach, but he was inconsistent in his purpose. You see, I think we have a lot of Christians who live life, and we're consistent in our approach, but we're inconsistent with our purpose. And many of us can confuse consistency in approach with honoring God. But we have to understand, what are we consistent in? Are we consistent in our ultimate purpose? And Daniel's going to teach us that today as we look into his story. Now, let me catch you up to speed for those of you who are kind of over there. Daniel, remember, he got stolen from his homeland. He got put into a kingdom, and God honored him. He was faithful to God, and God elevated him in a foreign kingdom. So he got all the way to a point where Nebuchadnezzar, he honored Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar honored him, and Nebuchadnezzar ultimately passes away. The kingdom is kind of spread in a short amount of time between a few different rulers, and then ultimately there's a new ruler that comes on the scene. And so he hears about Daniel. He knows how amazing Daniel is. And so this ruler, sounds like a smart guy, he says, I need to get my arms wrapped around my kingdom. So he identifies 120 satraps. And these individuals he assigned to his whole kingdom. These are individuals to oversee on the ground what's going on. Those 120 people report to 3 administrators. The 3 administrators, guess what? One of them was Daniel. So Daniel and 2 others are really controlling the kingdom for the new king. But then something happens. The king really has heard a lot about Daniel, and Daniel is consistent. He's got great character. He's got great integrity. And the king begins to trust Daniel's wisdom more and more and more, and begins to elevate him. And then word gets out that the king is going to turn his kingdom over to Daniel to run for him. Now, how many of you have ever been in a business and you have people who are at the same level as you? And how many of you have been working really hard, and all of a sudden the boss takes an extra interest in the people that are at your level, and he begins to elevate them over you? How does that make you feel? Some of you are like lying. You're like, oh, it's wonderful. I'm just thanking God and just for their lives and how wonderful that is for them. Good for you. Liars. The human side of most people is, why doesn't the boss see that in me? I mean, does he not see all that I bring to the table? I mean, I do a better job than he does. Why is he elevating him? He must be sucking up to the boss. That's what it is. And all of a sudden, these 2 administrators, they start getting together with the other 120, and they're tired of Daniel. They don't want to see him be elevated anymore. And so they devise a plan to be able to get Daniel out. And this is where we pick up the story in Daniel chapter 6, verse 4. It says this, at this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. These administrators, they dig through everything. Like for all of us in this room, if someone dug into your social media history, you'd be toast. But Daniel, they couldn't find anything on him. He was incredible. And they're like, dang it, why can't we get rid of this guy? And Daniel teaches us one of the first points. And it's a word we don't use often in today's culture, but it's one that's so important. So there's 2 points I want to give you today, and one is this. We all need to seek reliability. We need to seek reliability. Well, Terry, what do you mean by that? We need to seek to be reliable for others, and we need to seek to find others that are reliable, because that will improve the health of our lives. Well, how? Here are some benefits of being reliable, and we'll explain. First, reliability builds trust. How many of you have a parent that you would say, you know what, they're always reliable for me? And how many of you reach out to them when you have a struggle or you really, really need advice? You know the first person you think of is that person. Why? It's because they're reliable through thick and thin. Case in point, one of the most hurtful, not in necessarily someone to me, but just experiences that I had is when my dad passed away several years ago. He and I, we had baseball as a connection. And my dad, he played semi-pro ball for the Philadelphia Athletics a long time ago. And so talking higher levels of baseball with him was really easy to do. And so now being a dad of a baseball player, I remember one time I was driving on 501, I was crossing over a bridge, and there was something that I wanted to be able to, like kind of just figure out. And I thought to myself, oh, I know, I'll call my dad. And I reached over for my phone to pick up the phone to call my dad. And I realized at the moment, oh, he's no longer with me. That's the kind of reliability that you seek from other individuals, because reliability builds trust in the long term with another person. Here's another thing. Reliability reduces stress. When you are able to go to someone that you're reliable with and that is reliable to you, you can rest, right? Because when that person says something, it's going to be okay. You actually trust them and you can, breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. If you don't have anybody like that, you don't trust anybody, you're going up and down like a roller coaster. Third thing is it encourages communication. When you have someone you can trust and communicate with, you don't mind communicating openly and transparently. How many of you have ever worked for an organization where you go to the meeting and everybody's in the meeting and everybody says something at the table? And how many of you have been there where after that meeting's over, there's 22 other meetings about that meeting? If you work for an organization where there's 22 meetings about the meeting, you need to get out of that organization. Why is that? Because no one trusts one another. They sit there and they go afterwards in the hallway and they gossip. They say, did you hear what Susie said? She didn't know what she's talking about. But when you're reliable, it opens communication up. You're able to confront one another and talk to one another. Here at our team, it's funny, you can ask any one of our staff members. We have a part in our meetings where we gather everyone around the table, and we call it the moment where we pick a fight. And the reason why is because our team has gotten so close that we're reliable, we trust one another, and we're vulnerable with one another. And we actually say, hey, if you don't like something, or if you don't see the value in something, this is the opportunity to pick a fight with one another. And we're going to do it here, but we're not going to do it in the hallway. And so we love it. I love that portion. I was like, I'm going to go in and pick a fight. It's a lot of fun. But when you're reliable, you can do that because it inspires open communication. It develops respect for one another because you want to receive the information, because you respect the other person. It also fosters love. Because you know what? How much do you have to hate me to not tell me that I'm doing something wrong? And so when you have that kind of trust, you love one another to be open to be able to receive it. It does more. It also boosts acceptance in so many different ways, because you trust to be able to listen to somebody else's perspective. And so you sit there and you receive it and you're like, you know what? I didn't think that. Oh my gosh. You know what? I never would have thought that, but you taught me something today. Then it increases comfortability with one another. It improves your health. Gosh, how many of you have been a part of an organization and you finally end up leaving and you get a part of a healthy organization and you go, oh my gosh, how long did I deal with dysfunction before I finally found health? because you don't realize what a healthy situation is. It also impacts others. When you're in a relationship that is unhealthy, when you're not reliable to one another, you're constantly stressed. It also saves time. How many of you have been part of something that should just take easy? This is what it is. This is what I have to say. And I don't need to walk on eggshells. I don't need to do a circle around. It's like we can get straight to the point because we trust one another. It saves time. And so Daniel was that type of person. He was trustworthy. They could find no fault in him. He was who he says that he is. Now, Daniel's there, and Daniel realizes, they're trying to find ways to entrap me. Now, I want you to watch what Daniel does, because some of us, if we were writing the story, we'd be like, this would be the next chapter. Then Daniel got together with his friends, and he told them about what they were doing. Then he devised a plan to be able to entrap them. That would be the human story, right? But let's see what Daniel says. So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said this: "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown in the lion's den. So all of a sudden, Daniel's standing there, and then they double down. They said, you know what? We know Daniel. We know he honors a different God. So we're going to get the king to sign a decree. And by the way, the decree, and you're going to see in a second, I actually have from my seminary experience, our class ring is a signet ring. And the reason why it's a signet ring is that it's mirrored. And so when I go ahead and press it down, it actually is right side up. This was a signet ring that many of the kings used. And what happens is when they would issue a decree, if they went ahead with their signet ring, it was sealed. Whatever decree they gave could not be taken away. So they convinced the king to make a decree that anybody who worships anyone but him will get thrown in the lion's den. Well, Daniel knows this is not good for me. Watch what happens. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he devised a plan to get back at them. He left town. He attacked all the satraps. No, it doesn't say that, does it? It says he went to his home, to his upstairs room, where the windows open to Jerusalem. Now, if I were to continue the story, I'd be like, then he closed the windows so no one could see him. But watch what happens. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and he prayed with the windows open, giving thanks to his God. Don't miss this, just as he had done before. Daniel, what are you doing? You know they're after you. Daniel, you know that they just set a trap for you, and you go home and you let the windows be open and you do the same thing you've done before? Are you nuts? But Daniel remembers his purpose. And Daniel stays the course. And then, just as I thought, these men set a trap, and guess what? They just happened to be by Daniel's house and happened to see him doing this. Watch what happens. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying. They found him, right? Oh, we stumbled upon you. You happened to be praying. No, they went after him and they saw him. They found Daniel praying and asking God for help. Second principle that we learn from Daniel is very simple, is we need to not only seek reliability, but we need to seek consistency. And there are 3 ways that we seek consistency. We seek consistency in the places, in the routines of life. There are many of us that are here where we have to find a rhythm for our homes. We typically say that every family needs a rhythm. Now, every rhythm looks different, depending on the family, depending on your personality. It doesn't have to be the same rhythm. But every family needs a rhythm, and every parent knows this. A rhythm is beneficial for a child. Well, guess what? A rhythm is beneficial for adults. And Daniel, 3 times a day, reminded himself of the promises of God. Don't miss this. Daniel, 3 times a day, he opened the windows, he looked at Jerusalem, and he prayed to his God because he was in a foreign land, and there was nothing to say that he was ever going to get back there. But he said, I don't want to forget where I came from, and I don't want to forget my purpose, and so I'm going to be consistent in my rhythm and my routine to honor my God because I know my purpose. He was consistent in his communication. Now, if I was Daniel and these people went after me, then my communication would change with the king. The minute that they tried to find something wrong with me and I found out, I'd be like, hey, King Darius, do you mind if I have a side conversation with you? Hey, did you ever notice this and 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 this? You see, sometimes we allow outside circumstances that we can't control to dictate and change the things we can control. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes as followers of Jesus, we allow outside circumstances that we can't control to dictate and change the things that we can control. Daniel can control how he talks. Daniel can control how he monitors and runs his rhythm of his day. And you know one thing that Daniel did? He was consistent. I know my purpose. I trust my God. That's my line of conviction. I will pray to my God. I'm not changing anything, and I'm not going to go after them the way that they went after me, because that would change my character. And you know, when you get to a place where you trust God in all those things, you develop humility. Because when you remember your purpose, then you filter everything through your purpose. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and write an email, a nasty email about this person. Well, that would be gossip. And I'd be falling into the mud just like them. So I need to make sure that I honor my God in everything that I say that I do. Consistency matters, and there's a story about the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Many of you hear that word, Waldorf Astoria. You don't know the history or the beginnings or everything, but you know of it in high prestige, right? We've kind of heard of that, and we're like, oh, it has a good reputation as an amazing hotel. Well, where did it begin? Well, there's a guy by the name of George Bolt, and by the way, there's a lot of stories about this guy. This is the actual true story. You can check me on it, but this is the true story. George Bolt was running a hotel one night, and all of a sudden there was a family that had come in, and the weather was terrible. They came in, but the problem is that there was a convention back in the late 1800s, whatever a convention looked like. There was a convention in town, and all the rooms were booked. And George Bolt came in, or George Bolt was at the desk, and all of a sudden this family came in, and they said, can we have a room? And George Bolt looked at them and said, I'm so sorry, every room is taken. And so this family said, we know, we've kind of had that trouble. Thank you so much anyway. And they turned to walk out of the hotel, and lightning crashed, and it was just terrible weather. And George Bolt, being an amazing human being, he said, wait a second. And he came around the desk and he said, I'll tell you what, I can't in good conscience allow you with your family to go out in this weather. So I'll tell you what, I have a residence here at the hotel. And it has my personal effects and everything, and it's not much. But rather than you go out in the weather, I don't need to sleep tonight. I'm going to be busy with the hotel. I can find things to do. Why don't you and your family rest in my residence? They looked at him, they said, George, no, you need to sleep. He's like, no. He's like, I got some extra work I can do. I'm more than happy to allow you to come. Please, I would feel terrible if you went out in this weather, so you go ahead and you stay. And you know what? There's no charge because it's really not a room for you. It's really my thing. So please forgive the mess. I invite you to stay. This family went in, they spent the night in his room. The next morning, before they left, one of the individuals looked at George and said, I want to thank you for what you did. I so appreciate it. Because what George hadn't known is while they were walking to his residence, there were individuals that worked at the hotel that were in the hallway that greeted them, and they just told them, like, wow, the person at your front desk let us stay in, and they said, oh, well, that's George. That's who George is. And they just commented about how George was amazing and incredible and everything else. So the family left and they said, thank you. You have no idea how much this meant to me and my family, and I promise you, good things will happen in your life. So they left. Well, within 2 years, all of a sudden, a telegram came to George Bolt, and he was standing there at the front desk and he read it, and there was a ticket inside, and it was a train ticket to New York City. And the telegram said this, that we invite you to come to meet with our family. You took us in from the weather and elements, and we never forgot it, and we'd like for you to be able to come to visit us because we have something we would like to talk to you about. George got on the train, went to New York City, and not realizing that family were related to the family of Waldorf Astoria. And so all of a sudden, the head of the family looks at George and says this, I want to show you something. And he pointed to his hotel in New York City and said, I want the kind of man that has the character and integrity that you showed to run my hotel. Would you lead the Waldorf Astoria brand? And George Bolt became the head of that hotel at that time. Consistency matters. You never know what people think. You never know, but people are watching. And as followers of Jesus, we have to be consistent in our faith. Sometimes it doesn't work out in this world for us, but it doesn't mean that consistency doesn't matter, because what's our purpose? We have to be consistent with our purpose. So Daniel gets brought before, and all of a sudden, it's bad news for Daniel. Let's end the story. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him in the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Do you know how crazy that is? This king issued a decree which caused him to be thrown in the lion's den. He can't take it away. And the king that had him thrown in the lion's den said, "May your God rescue you." That's how much Daniel's consistency mattered. So a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Could you imagine being in that lion's den? All of a sudden it's dark, you can't see anything, and you hear just the breath of the lions. Then all of a sudden you're there and you feel a little moisture on the back of your neck as the saliva from the lion right behind you, breathing heavy, is there. I mean, get me out of there. Well, you know, we can't be at that story, and we can't see how that story went in that night and for Daniel, what he went through. But I believe that a lot of us go through a lot of lion's dens. You might say, well, how? I think a lot of us are facing them. These are modern day lions. So modern day lions that we face is this: when we're in our workplaces, there might be new management that says you're laid off. God, why? I didn't do anything to deserve this. Don't you know what my family's going through? A modern day lion is hearing your loved one say, "I still care about you, but I'm no longer in love with you." The pain that goes with that. A modern day lion might be a doctor that says, "I'm not pleased with the biopsy results." A modern day lion might be, "I'm sorry, there was nothing more we could do." You see, we all are in the lion's den from time to time. But if we seek reliability and seek consistency, we're reminded of our purpose. And some of us may say, "Well, Terry, what good is that?" Well, I want to remind you of our purpose and why we do what we do as a follower of Jesus. Revelations 5:5 says this: "Then one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed.'" See, the actual Lion of Judah triumphed. And so we can trust, even in our worst moments, even in the lion's den, we can trust the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and the Lion of Judah. And some of you say, "But Terry, you don't know my situation." And you use the words, "but, how, can't, impossible." But, how, can't, impossible. How many of you ever uttered those words? We do that a lot from the lion's den. But I want to remind you of 1 John 4:4 that says this: "You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world, who is the enemy." You can stand in front of any lion, and you could stand boldly. So Daniel has been consistent, reliable. And the next morning, we pick the story up in verse 19. "At the first light of dawn, the king got up and he hurried to the lion's den." Wouldn't you love to have the character of Daniel, where the person who threw you in the lion's den rushes down to the lion's den in the hopes that you survived? That's the kind of impact Daniel had. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouth of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor, king, have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." And the king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Could you imagine the other satraps and administrators standing there when Daniel called back to the king? Oh, crud. And could you imagine when Daniel said, "My God shut the mouths of the lions, for I have not done anything wrong, your majesty," as if to say, I was put here because of those people. I have not done anything wrong. Could you imagine what those administrators must have been like? Oh, let's get out of Dodge. But there are some of us in this room that are facing lion's dens, or we're in lion's dens, and we're having a hard time trusting God in that way. And what I would tell you is this: maybe it's because you keep going into these situations and you have forgotten your purpose and you're just swinging as hard as you can, hoping to find anything. When the truth is that our purpose is to glorify Jesus Christ in everything that we say and do, no matter what happens here on this earth. You see, followers of Jesus, we forget at times that God promises us difficult times. But showing faith is really easy on the mountaintops. But showing faith in the valleys and in the lion's den, that's when others take notice. That's when people are inspired. That's what changes hearts and lives. It's when we spread our base and we remember our purpose and we say, God, no matter what happens, I'm going to put this ball in play. I don't care what lion they throw at me. I don't care what I face. I'm going to stand for you. And so if you're facing a lion today, I have one phrase I want you to remember today. It's time to tell the lions in your life to shut your mouth. Because the Lion of Judah stands with me. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And I will honor my God no matter what happens. I will be consistent. I will be reliable. Hail the Lion of Judah. Because consistency brings clarity to purpose. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you so much for this message. And right now, Lord, I pause and I pray for my brothers and sisters because, Lord, we come into this place to worship you. We come into this place to hear and be reminded of your truth. I thank you for the rhythm that you've given us, God, especially those that come on a consistent basis, God, because we need that truth. We need to be reminded of that truth. And so, God, today, in an attitude of prayer, for all those who are struggling with lions in the lion's den, today, may your heart speak to God, and may you say, God, I trust you. God, help me to be consistent in the moments where I'm inconsistent. And God, no matter what happens here on earth, I will stand with my head held high because you are faithful. You are sovereign. And your purpose is my purpose. And I will never forget that. So God, we love you today. May we fulfill your purpose each day of our lives to our kids, to our coworkers, to our family and friends. And may you receive the glory in Jesus' name.